I'm trapped. Maybe I shouldn't bother you. Maybe I kind of deserve my fate. But if someone doesn't send help soon, roll the credits, 'cause I'm finished. Let's start from the beginning. My name is Kyle, and I'm in the 8th grade. We had just moved into this stuck-up little town and this cruddy old house because my grandmother died and Dad wanted to fix it up before selling it. Me and Dad were in the attic sorting boxes when a side of one split open and comic books spilled out. "Look at these," my father said. "Must have been my old man's." We took a break to pore over the faded Batmans and Dick Tracy's. Flipping through a Superman, I stopped on a weird ad. "Sea monkeys," it said, only the monkeys was crossed out and replaced by the word monsters. "A bowl of terror and mischief," the ad announced. "Scare your friends, scare your parents, scare yourself. Just add water and watch the little devils grow." A drawing showed a sailing ship surrounded by serpentine figures. I showed my dad. A big smile broke out on his face. "Oh, I remember these," he said. "I know pretty much what I'll look like when I grow up. If I grow up, for everyone says I'm the spitting image. Dad has a slender frame, warm face, thick glasses, and a hairline that has retreated to its last stand on the back of his head. Like me, he's a bit of a spaz." "Obviously this is a scam," I scoffed. "How could they get away with that?" "If I remember," he replied, "sea monkeys are a kind of shrimp, like you." He tousled my hair. I hated being called that, but something about the fact that he only did it when we were alone made it tolerable. "So what are these?" "Probably something similar, who knows? Come on, let's finish up." When Dad took a break for beer and gummy bears, I googled the company, and amazingly, they were still around. The price had only gone up to $12.99. I waited till Dad was on his 4th beer and 2nd gummy bear before getting him to buy the monsters. A week later, I was crossing the street to go check the mailbox. Mabel, our wrinkly basset hound, watched warily from the porch. At the illustrious age of 4, she had little enthusiasm for more than watching stuff. My little sister Allie, practicing her kickboxing on the front lawn, eyed me up suspiciously, wondering about my sudden interest in the mail. If I had a sworn enemy in life, it was Allie. A year younger than me, she inherited Mom's height and athletic ability, and of all the indignities I have had to put up with in my life, the worst of the worst was that she could kick my ass. Reaching the mailbox, my pulse raced when I saw the package with my name on it. But I didn't want Allie poking her nose into my business. What to do? I was anxious to open up my package, so I darted across the street with the box and a handful of letters, irrationally hoping she would just leave me alone. She was closing in on me by the time I reached the walkway. "What you got?" "The mail, what's it look like?" She wore gym shorts, a t-shirt, and mixed martial arts gloves. We'd only been to this school for 2 days, and already Allie had risen up the social ladder. Where genetics had conspired against me, leaving me short, skinny, and four-eyed, it had turned Allie into a princess. Long blonde hair, tall and athletic, not as smart as me, but smart enough that brains gave me no advantage. 6 days out of 7, Allie picked on me, and the 7th, she ignored me. "Let me see the package," she insisted. "It's for Dad." I shifted the package to my other arm, aware of the mistake as soon as I did it, but unable to stop myself. Like a coiled spring, she kicked in front of my chin. My legs stopped moving. "Mind your business, Allie." I took another tentative step, but a kick in the air stopped me, the wind from it knocking my eyeglasses askew. I decided to run. Allie was much faster, but she was barefoot, so all I had to do was make it to the gravel driveway where she couldn't run. The generals in my mind determined it was a good strategy, drafted the order, stamped it, and sent it along to my legs to be carried out immediately. But the chain of command within my body often failed me, and it did so here. While my legs did not yet move, my eyes somehow gave away my intentions, and during this delay, she struck with a leg sweep. I hope to God no one else saw it. It was almost as demeaning as what happened yesterday, when I was getting bullied at recess and Allie put a stop to it. That did wonders for my social ranking, let me tell you. Now she had me in a scissor lock, her legs around my neck. While the male blew across the lawn, she grabbed at the package, but I had it in a death grip under my arm. "Give it over," she commanded. "No!" She took the bottom of her foot, dirty with grass and dust, and smacked me in the face, rendering me almost blind as my glasses dropped to my nose. Surrender was now unavoidable. "Okay," I said. "We'll do it together, but I'm in charge." She released me and sprang to her feet, helping me up. "There, was that so hard?" she said. "Now what's in the box?" I took her past Mabel, whose only movement was a slight wagging of her tail, through the garage, the laundry room, and finally into a small furnace room where I already had an aquarium set up. "What is this, fish? Jeez, what a dweeb." I could see Allie had already lost interest and was about to return to her martial activities when, again, a screw-up in the chain of command occurred. The order had gone out to keep silent so she would leave, but my mouth took its own initiative and tried to seal the deal. Yeah, it's just a goldfish." But my eyes betrayed my mouth, and of course, Allie didn't miss it. "Okay," she said, her curiosity having been reignited. "Let's open it." I opened the package, my sister's presence spoiling the moment, and emptied out smaller packages, water purifier, food, and what apparently were eggs. Allie grabbed the instruction sheet. "Sea monsters?" Okay, it's stupid," I said, "but I just want to see what they are." She put her hands on her hips, which, and in her way of thinking, meant, "This is serious, so listen up, buddy." "Under no circumstances," she ordered, "can you tell anyone at school, and especially not the boys across the street." "Right. We don't want any kids nosing around." "No. What we don't want is to make the target on your back any bigger." "Oh, right. Good point." I had already filled the tank with aquarium sand. Now I went to the laundry room sink and began filling a bucket of lukewarm water. Allie followed me. She seemed worried. "Why don't you come outside and let me show you some moves?" She wore that fake concerned look. I knew she just wanted another excuse to rough me up some more, so I ignored her. "Fine, get your butt kicked at school again." With that, she finally left. The sea monster instructions were simple. Empty the purifier into the water, pour the eggs in. They may take some time to hatch. Feed 1 teaspoon of food a day. As they grow, you may try to feed them vegetables or fruit, but under no circumstances feed them any meat. After adding the purifier, I inspected the 4 eggs in the bag. They just looked like 4 cheap glass trinkets. Nothing to lose at this point, however, so I poured them into the middle of the tank and watched them settle into the sand. Little trails of vapor streamed off them. That was encouraging. I heard my mother throwing in a wash. When she entered in the furnace room, I didn't look up. "I guess your monsters came in," she said. I nodded. Mom stands taller than my dad and only wears glasses when reading. She had tied up her long hair, which meant she was either going running or about to conduct a Zoom class. She taught art history at a community college and was busy trying to finish her book. She indulged my sea monster thing to compensate for disrupting my life and making me move here for a year. She kissed me on the top of the head, left me watching the eggs, willing them to hatch. The next morning, sleep still in my eyes, I ventured down into the furnace room, and to my surprise, the eggs had been replaced by 4 small holes in the sand. "Holy Schlitz!" as Dad liked to say. I crouched down for a closer look. Wait, was Allie playing a joke on me? But then a thought came into my mind with such force that I took a step back. Feed them. So I took a teaspoon and measured out some food and dropped it into the water. The food sifted slowly to the bottom. I had my nose pressed against the glass. When some of the food reached the holes, I held my breath. But nothing. I watched them a long time. Allie popped into the room. "Hey," she teased. "It's the weenie from Shalini." "Go away." As she came closer, her face changed, going from amused to serious. "You gotta feed them, Kyle." I turned in surprise. She never called me by my actual name. I went back to watching, and sometime later, to my surprise, Mabel actually came in. She stood beside me, sniffing in the air. I crouched and put an arm around her. "I thought you didn't like it down here." Mabel was not usually a fan of stairs or exercise, and certainly not the furnace room with its spooky noises. She sat down, facing the tank, her tail slowly wagging on the floor. "What is it, girl?" When I left to go have breakfast, to my shock, she stayed behind staring at the tank. After eating, I decided maybe what the tank needed was something to make it look more like the ocean bottom, like a piece of coral or a conch shell, so I could hold Dad into taking me to Petco. Pulling out of the driveway, we saw Allie, basketball in hand at the top of the neighbor's driveway, playing with the O'Keefes. Dad waved cheerily. "You should go join the game when we get back," Dad suggested. "They already have an even number, Dad." He nodded, unable to wiggle past that logic. "So I had a dream last night," he said, "about your sea monsters." "Really? What did they look like?" "I don't know, the water was murky, kinda like this Loch Ness thing, I guess. I wish they'd come out so I could see them. I think you just have to feed them more." Gee, where have I heard that? An hour later, a Spanish galleon with 3 layers of cannon portholes sank to the bottom. I had dropped it rather than place it, not wanting my sleeves to get wet. Yeah, that was the reason. It settled on the bottom rather close to one of the little holes. I watched very closely to see if any creature emerged, and had been watching a long time when my mom entered all sweaty from having just been on her daily run. She stood behind me with her hands on my shoulders. "How are they doing?" I shrugged. "Well, how are you doing? Meet anyone interesting at school?" I guess. It takes time, especially for the really smart kids. I didn't really have any good friends till grad school." "That's encouraging." She laughed. Key word being good. I felt her hands leave my shoulders. I'd always been closer to Dad because he was, well, fun. Dad shot a basketball worse than me, and his wiry arms and legs seemed not always on the same page together. But Dad could laugh about it, which made people comfortable around him. Mom, on the other hand, always had it together, a hard standard to live up to. Yet Mom also made me feel safe, like she was in control. One time a few years ago, we'd had a burglar in the house in the middle of the night. While Dad stumbled around looking for something that could be used as a weapon, eventually settling on a broom, Mom quietly called the police, then loudly told Dad to use the shotgun shells. At first he didn't understand since neither of them knew anything about ammo and they didn't actually own a firearm. By the time he caught on and shouted something about making his day, the intruder was a shadow running across the lawn. Mom's voice now trailed from beyond the laundry room. "Don't forget to feed them." With still no sign of life within the holes, I decided it was time to do just that. A few minutes later, I returned with a small handful of Rice Krispies. Mabel decided to come with me, but the snap, crackle, and pop material turned out to be less than ideal food, since they just floated on the water. So I ran up and took a carrot from the fridge, skinned it, and cut some small pieces. While I finished, Mabel's excited barking reached me from the cellar. I ran back full speed, chunks of carrot in hand. I arrived in the furnace room to find Mabel sitting facing the tank with her tail wagging on the floor. Adjusting my glasses, I studied the tank, expecting to finally see some action. But nothing. Nothing at all. Just 4 holes in a Spanish galleon. However then, I noticed the Rice Krispies were gone. Ah, so they're just shy. I dropped the carrot pieces into the aquarium. They settled onto the sandy bottom, with one of them landing on the ship, becoming its only cargo. When nothing further happened, I stepped back towards the door to the laundry room and spied on the tank from there. But still, nothing happened. This time when I left, I made Mabel come with me. I played a video game with Dad the rest of the afternoon. When I went back to check on the tank sometime after supper, I found Allie standing before it. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Nothing, don't worry." I noticed the carrot pieces were gone. "Did you see anything?" I asked. "No, but I think maybe if they eat more." She held a broccoli spear over the tank. When she started to reach into the water, I pulled her arm out. For some reason, it frightened me to think of my sister's hand in the water going anywhere near those holes. "What's the matter with you?" she barked. "It says not to touch the water." I lied. "Something about contamination, I think." "Fine, baby." She dropped the broccoli into the water from safely above. It crashed to the seabed between the holes. We watched for minutes, but nothing moved. Finally, she gave up, saying, "Your life is so lame." No doubt a lethal retort was on the tip of my tongue, but I thought it best to not give her an excuse to hang around any longer. I stood there watching a long time, and while I did, 2 terrifying but compelling thoughts came into my mind. The first was that maybe I should feed them some meat. What could go wrong? If it killed them, so what? They never showed themselves anyway. The second was terrifying simply because of its pure strangeness. That I should stand next to the tank facing away from it. The following morning, a Monday, I resisted the urge to bring some of my breakfast bacon down to the aquarium. Under no circumstances feed them any meat, it had said. I was the kind of kid that obeyed the rules. Sure, like everyone, I had a joker in my head that sometimes blurted out inappropriate thoughts. A little voice that interrupts the regular programming of your mind with something that usually goes against good sense. I learned long ago to ignore that joker. Dad usually made breakfast, but Mom took care of lunches for school. She was handing paper bags to Allie and me at the door with a kiss. She always showed more affection to me, but I figured she was compensating for a preference for Allie. Still, I relished the warmth of her cheek against mine, and I always wanted to believe her when she told me how handsome I looked. Every day they sent me out to be slaughtered by the wolves, but I understood my parents believed it would make me strong someday. I was filled with dread as me and Allie climbed on that bus. One of the O'Keefe twins who wanted to impress Allie almost knocked me over with a high five. We sat down behind them. "You could at least make an effort," she whispered to me. Right, so I was making her life so miserable by embarrassing her. At school that day, I daydreamed more than usual. During history, I imagined that terrorists invaded the school, black-clad men armed with multiple weapons each, and while one of them was more or less ignoring me, I swiped a handgun from his belt. I'd never held a gun, certainly didn't know how to use one, but how hard could it be? I saved many lives before history class ended, but on the way to algebra, kids were bumping me like I wasn't even in the hallway. I settled behind my desk, and in my next daydream, I again found a gun, only this time there were no terrorists, only me and my classmates, and they sure noticed me now. On the bus home, I felt the lowest I'd ever felt, because I knew that daydream had crossed a line. I wasn't one of those kids, the ones who knew they didn't have a future, so they did something crazy and horrible. I wouldn't really take pleasure in seeing anyone hurt, and besides, the other kids weren't the problem. I was. When I got home, Dad was busy cutting pieces of paneling for one of the bedrooms. He had protective goggles over his glasses and bits of sawdust on his nose. "Hey, little guy," he said. "How was your day?" "Awesome," I deadpanned. Not catching the sarcasm, Dad replied, "Great, keep up the good work." I went to check on my monsters, and to my shock found Mabel sitting there watching the tank. She wagged her tail at my arrival. "Hey girl, are they doing anything?" I looked for myself. 4 holes in the sand, nothing more. Why was everything in my life so lame? That settled it. I left Mabel in the furnace room. Time to get some meat. Mabel was still there when I came back with some leftover ham. 4 pieces. She wagged her tail when I dropped them into the aquarium. I crouched down with Mabel, arm around her, watching with anticipation. Again, I had to ignore that weird urge to turn my back to the tank. I watched a long time, with nothing happening, and Mabel finally grew bored and left. I followed her up the stairs. The family had dinner together and no one mentioned the monsters. Dad told corny jokes, Mom laughed despite her usual effort to not encourage him, and Allie tried to one-up her dad, but failed as always. After dinner, we played Scrabble, the one thing in Dad life took seriously. No one ever challenged any words he put down, no matter how absurd they seemed, because his knowledge of obscure words was almost supernatural. Usually, he won, though sometimes Mom let him. And though both Allie and I were aware of it, neither told our father. His Scrabble victories meant something to him. After the game, I noticed Allie heading down to the cellar and decided to follow. Sure enough, she headed straight for the furnace room. Mabel tagged alongside me. When I looked in the tank, to my shock, the bits of ham were gone. But something else had been left in the sand. Skins. 4 skins like from shedding snakes. I had worried I'd kill the things with the meat. Allie pressed her face close to the tank. "What are these things?" she asked. "I don't know, Dad says maybe shrimp." Allie started to reach into the water, but I ripped her arm back. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "Relax, Dorkowski. I'm not gonna bother them, I just want to look at that skin." I relented as she dipped her hand into the water. I held my breath. I watched the long, pale, slender hand of my sister reaching down, closer to a hole. I hated her, but then again not really, and the thought of something hurting her. She grabbed for the skin, but it slipped through her fingers. Did something move just beneath the surface of the hole? I looked at the sand below the water line. Something stirred within, like tentacles or a nest of snakes. The light refracting through the water made it hard for her to locate the skin. Her index finger drew a small path in the sand. Then that urge struck again. Turn away from the tank. And was my sister turning away too as she felt for the skin? "Come on, forget about it," I told her. "I got it." Her hand withdrew from the water with a piece of skin. Mabel barked. Mom entered from the laundry room. Mom, look, Allie said. Mom and I examined the skin held in my sister's palm. What is it? Allie asked. Looks reptilian, Mom replied. Or maybe cephalopod? Squid? I asked. She nodded. I have a friend in the biology department. Let me see what she says. Mom left with the skin while Allie and I returned to examine the tank. Is it me? My sister asked. Or do those holes seem bigger than yesterday? I just nodded. Kyle? I turned to her. Don't put your hand in there, she said. As the week went by, I mostly avoided the furnace room, having the growing sense that whatever lurked inside that aquarium might be dangerous. I debated whether I should get my father to help me lug the whole thing into the yard and just dump it all out, but then I worried that might not kill them. So maybe I should just dump bleach into the water. The Joker in my head burst in with his own idea. Give them more meat! However, I knew how to ignore that voice, and not only did I not feed them more meat, I stopped feeding them anything. But I started to suspect others in the family were. I'd catch Mom, Dad, or Allie leaving the furnace room with sly looks on their face. They always went in alone and never said anything, but there were times they seemed a little bit sneaky. None of them ever said anymore, "Don't forget to feed them." Mabel began making the furnace room her main habitat, only coming upstairs for meals. It bothered me that no one else in the family found this strange. Mabel didn't have much ambition as a rule, but she always liked being around the family. On the following Monday, I was doing homework at the kitchen table when I heard Mabel let out a sharp yelp from down in the furnace room. I slowly rose, afraid of what had happened, hoping someone else had heard it and would come to check on her. No one did. So I crept over to the cellar door and started down the stairs, but I had only gone a few steps when Mabel burst around the corner and came charging up the stairs, still whimpering a little. She went right past me, and when I tried to follow her, found she had disappeared under a desk where Mom sat conducting a Zoom class session. I had no choice but to stay out the room until her session was over. But I could have sworn I'd seen a wet spot on the dog's head as she ran. I decided to go down and check on the tank. A strange mix of feelings came with this decision. Revulsion, excitement, fear, curiosity. Strangely, the Joker actually seemed to shrivel up, hiding in a corner of my mind. Creeping into the furnace room, I observed water on the floor in front of the tank. Not much, maybe just enough to slip on. Arriving at the tank, my heart pounding, I looked inside. Nothing unusual, except now there were only 3 holes. I went to bed early, though I did not sleep for hours. Processing all this became very difficult. Facing me on my bureau sat a photo of me with my parents and sister from 2 years ago. 6th grade. I had been a completely different person. When my sister was in 5th grade, I looked out for her. I played hoops every day with Dad and had no idea we both stunk. And when Mom fawned all over me before leaving school, I felt no self-consciousness at all. I was still unnoticed, but unaware of it. The universe felt wide open. But a shadow had descended on me since then. I felt it a little more every day. The next morning, I found Mabel sheltering under Mom's desk, Mom out on an early morning run. I could have sworn I heard her whimpering while eating breakfast. When I crouched down to check on her, she raised the corner of her lip and growled a little. Wow, that dog never growled. Allie came up from the cellar, which seemed surprising, since she usually slept in on Saturday. What's up? I asked. Like it's any of your business, she replied. At least that felt normal. But why was she downstairs? Then the urge to go visit the tank came so sharply in my mind that I found myself standing there blinking. My sister walked away shaking her head. Only when I realized my legs were edging toward the cellar door did I send out the panicky order to stop them. I stood there in a daze, unsure where to go or what to do. My world shifting beneath my feet, everything in this house feeling menacing now. Like the house itself was a monster and my family had unwittingly fed themselves to it. And I was the only one even aware they needed to escape before being digested. The ringing of the doorbell unfroze me. Mabel let out a small whimper of pain. Dad had gone to pick up coffee and Mom was still on a run, so I answered the door. A small woman with a receding jaw and sparkling eyes greeted me with a British accent. "Hello, is your mum home? You must be Kyle. I work with her at the university." "Hi." She brought what turns out to be a more interesting biological specimen. "Really? What did you find?" "Is your mum here?" "She's on a run. Should be back soon. You could come in and wait." I led the woman to the kitchen. "I'm Lynn Barrett," she explained. "You're a very bright boy, I've been told. Very interested in science." "Yeah, science is cool." We both sat at an island counter in the kitchen. Miss Barrett pulled out a printout. "I should be upset with this little trick you've played on me, Kyle. It costs a lot of resources to run a DNA analysis. But just how you managed it is really intrigued me." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's really impressive. That sample we got really looks like skin, but somehow you got the DNA to show something that's, well, impossible." I spread my hands and gave a slight shake of my head to show my bafflement. "Look," she said, "right here." She pointed to the printout. "According to this, the DNA is a mixture of something similar to a squid with something, well, very different." "Different?" "Amino acids," she replied. "Or what looks like amino acids anyway, only with sulfur molecules replacing the carbon." "Okay, I'm not sure I like science that much." She'd lost me. "Naturally," she explained, "I don't expect you figured out how to design your own nucleotides. But perhaps you found something very peculiar and marinated some squid inside of it. Brilliantly done, whatever it is. I wouldn't want you to think you're in any trouble. My own brother once blew up the garage with his chemistry set. You're not doing anything like that, I hope." But I was already jumping to my feet in terror. "Miss Barrett, you must help me get rid of them." "Don't panic, dear boy. What is the matter?" "I sent for these things and put them in the water as instructed." I began pulling the woman to her feet. "And I did everything right, except it said not to feed them meat, and now they are a danger to everyone." I pulled her through the house, down the stairs, and toward the furnace room, fighting to keep my glasses from flying off while she fought to keep hers. I released her before we reached the tank. She approached cautiously, eyeing the holes in the sand at the 3 remaining skins. I worried she was standing too close. I wished the tank had a cover. "Whatever they are," I said, "we have to kill them." Worried maybe she still believed I was playing a trick on her, I stepped a little closer so I could see her better. But something strange had come over her, something that drained much of the life out of her face. "Well, I... she stammered in confusion. "Please," I said. "Really, I must," she said, taking a half step back and searching for the words. "I must be going. She turned and left, with me trying to catch up with her as she bolted up the stairs. "Tell your mum I stopped by. A very clever joke, very clever." She never slowed to look back at me, just kept going right out the door, down the walk into her car. Mom or Dad would be home soon. Maybe one of them would know what to do. No. This is my fault. I had to do something now. So, I returned to the basement. I placed my hand on the bottle of bleach on top of the washer. I froze there, a wash of miserable feelings coming over me. What kind of person harms innocent creatures? But they were not so innocent, were they? I asked myself, didn't you bring them into this world? You're their father, their God. But I didn't know what they were. Had no idea, and I would never bring anything that could harm my family into this house. You don't have the guts to do it anyway, the voice told me. I had no answer for that, and a wave of self-loathing rolled in. Finally, with trembling hands, I lifted the bleach and entered the furnace room. Only, someone was already there. Allie, lying on the floor, beside the tank, doing her stretches. "What are you doing?" I asked. "What does it look like?" "But why in here?" "I don't know, the grass was wet. Why do you have bleach?" "Oh, I was just going to do some laundry." "Since when do you do laundry?" She had her back to the tank, her torso stretching toward her straightened leg. "You know how it is," I said, "if you want something done right. I hope whatever you have, big brother, it isn't contagious." "Right. Well, you should do those somewhere else, Allie." She scowled at me. "Let me know when you have an army so you can tell me what to do." "I'm serious," I insisted. "The air's not good down here." "True," she said, rising to her feet. "Starting to smell like bleach and nerd." She stormed out. I stood alone now, bleach in hand, staring at the tank. "You don't have the guts." I took a step closer. "Maybe if you turned around while you did." Another step closer. But wait, that made sense. Turn around, reach behind, and just pour the bleach in with your back to the tank. I turned around. I stepped backward toward the tank. Started to unscrew the cap on the bleach. Another step closer. A god has the right to destroy his creation, doesn't he? Even the duty to if things were not as expected, like Noah's God sending the flood. Just get a little closer. Then I heard the garage door opening. Dad. Maybe he would have a better idea. I hurried out the furnace room, but glancing back as I turned out the light, I thought I saw black and squirming things slithering back into the holes. I found my father, taking groceries and a case of beer from the car. "For later," he said, "when I'm done working." I knew the first beer would be cracked by noon, and since it kept Dad out of Mom's hair, she didn't mind. Dad then noticed the look on my troubled face. "What's bugging you, little man?" "Can you help me get rid of those things inside the tank?" "Oh no, you can't do that. God's creatures and all that." "You aren't religious." "But it's a fine philosophy, isn't it?" I helped him load individual beers into the cellar fridge. "Live and let live," he said. "Imagine the eons of evolution that went into whatever those little guys are in that tank. You just add water and a bit of food to some tiny little eggs, and out of that you get little creatures. Amazing. Can we please just get rid of them?" I wondered if I should tell my father about what happened to Mabel. But what had happened to her? "Tell you what. You let me take care of them, and when they're starting to outgrow their home, I'll find them another one." "Dad. Go on, it'll be okay. Don't I always take care of things? Actually, it was really Mom that took care of most things. Go find your sister and keep an eye on her. Make sure those kids across the street aren't giving her a hard time. With his corny smile, he nudged me out of the garage. I knew full well Allie could more than take care of herself, so I walked up the street in the opposite direction, all the while having to resist the strange urge to return to the furnace room and stand with my back to the tank. Along the way, my mother passed me on the other side of the street. 3 things startled me about this. First, she was walking instead of running, and walking kinda sluggishly. Second, she wore a knit hat that belonged to my dad, and she never wore hats. Finally, she didn't seem to recognize me. When I waved, she didn't see it, or perhaps ignored me, staring straight ahead and moving right past. My hand, slowly, absent-mindedly, went to the back of my head, feeling around for anything unusual. I walked in a daze, autumn leaves drifting around me. No destination. I kept walking, unable to think clearly. Hours I apparently walked, for it had become the late afternoon when I finally found myself slipping into my house. The tug drawing me toward the furnace room was overwhelming, but I resisted. Allie in the kitchen helping Mom cut vegetables flashed me a smile. "Hey, big brother, what's up?" Was I in the right house? I talked Mom into making her favorite beef stew. "Alright," I replied, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. My mother didn't even look at me. "Ma? How come you ignored me today?" Finally she turned, but her face looked like she'd been shot up with Novocaine, and her eyes stared right over me. Came out of her mouth. She had a little incident, Allie explained. Sprained ankle, ice heat, then pain meds. That's why I'm helping. Mom forced a smile. I continued on to my room, half expecting to find another me in my bed, since I'd obviously stumbled into an alternate reality of some sort. Maybe this other Kyle could dribble a basketball between his legs and see more than 3 feet without glasses. It would be pretty cool to meet a Kyle like that, but no such luck. An hour and a half later, Allie called me down to dinner with the kind of cheerful voice she reserved for kids who could shoot from the 3-point line. I showed up with the same caution I approached gym class with, expecting horrors to ensue. But of course, nothing of the sort happened. Allie told me how lucky she was to have an 8th grader for a brother. Huh? And Mother had recovered enough speech to remark how excellent the beef stew was, some of which dribbled down her chin. Dad seemed normal, and if he was oblivious at all to the fact that his daughter and wife seemed a little off, that too was normal. After supper, I retreated to the fortress of my bedroom. I hunted aliens on PlayStation, watched old episodes of The Twilight Zone on Netflix, and created an avatar for a virtual colony on Mars. While trying everything to take my mind off what might be going on outside the fortress, the underlying anxiety I felt never ceased. I imagined this was what it might feel like to be on death row, knowing your execution was set for tomorrow. At long last, I turned out the light and rolled over to go to sleep. I had been lying there for some time when something pushed open the door, letting in a little light from the hallway. My heart raced. I was afraid to move. Whimpering reached me from the floor. I tried to turn on the bedside lamp, but the bulb blew, so I opened my laptop to get a little bluish light, pushed on my eyeglasses, and found the source of the whimpering. Mabel, looking up at me crying. I could just barely see her in the limited light. "What is it, girl?" The dog, no longer agile enough to hop onto my bed, jumped up with her front paws and continued crying in pain. I reached down and scooped her into the bed beside me. I smoothed the fur on her back and she settled a little. It warmed my heart to know she still sought solace in me. Ever since that incident in the furnace room, she had been very out of character, grumbling whenever I went near her. Now, she seemed her old self, though in a little pain. As I continued petting her, my hand found my way to the folds of skin at her neck, and then to the thick bone on the top of her head. She let out a cry but otherwise didn't move, but I felt wetness there. Grabbing my cell phone, I pressed the flashlight app and examined her head. Blood. Gasping, I sat up, quick, examining the dark splotch on my hand. Looking again at the dog's head, I was relieved to find only a small amount of blood. But then, Mabel began to shiver violently. "It's okay, girl," I tried to soothe her. However, the shivers turned into convulsions. I pulled away and stood crouched on the mattress, wanting to scream for help but finding I could not. A convulsion knocked Mabel off the bed. I aimed my flashlight beam at her on the floor. She continued to convulse and her head split open. Something like a tentacle pushed out. Again, I tried to scream and could not. I had trouble keeping the light on the dog with my trembling hand. A second tentacle came out and some kind of head. I could only get a glimpse in the shifting light. The tentacle pulled on Mabel's head, and the thing that emerged had raptor legs, an octopus head, and tentacle arms. A second one came out, helped by the first one pulling it. I aimed the phone's flash at their faces and they hissed at me. They started looking around the room. Finally, they moved toward the heating vent in the wall, taking little hops. One of them used its tentacle arms to pull the vent cover off the wall. It waited for the other one to slither into the vent, then went in behind it, closing the vent with the cover from the inside. At last, I found my voice, screaming at the top of my lungs. A scream that didn't stop until Mom and Dad and Allie poured into my room, turning the ceiling light on. Their eyes, of course, went immediately to the dead basset hound on the floor, her head split open. "Oh, poor baby," Mom said. "It was her time," Allie added. "She was very old," Dad agreed. "She had a good life." "She was only 4 years old," I yelled. "And look at her head!" Mom came over and smoothed my hair. "Death can be quite unpleasant, sweetie." "Monsters came out of her head," I told them. "You've always had a wonderful imagination," Dad remarked with a smile. "It's what I love about you," Allie said with her own creepy grin. "But they're in the walls." I pointed to a trail of wetness leading to the vent. "She did leave a mess." Dad shook his head. "Poor thing." He bent down and picked Mabel's corpse up. "Allie, can you get the mop?" But Allie was already cleaning the floor with one of my sweatshirts. She was doing a terrible job, smiling the whole time. Mom gently pushed me into the bed and straightened my legs, pulling the blankets up around me. "We need to call an exterminator or something," I insisted. All three of my family stopped what they were doing and gave me a hard stare. "Or 911?" I proposed sheepishly. Mom took my cell phone and put it in her pocket. Allie took my laptop. Dad, heading through the door with Mabel, flashed one last smile at me. "Try to get some sleep, little guy." I then noticed the wound on the back of his bald head as he left. Mom pulled my glasses from my face. "You'll sleep better without these." She and Allie left the room, turning off the light and closing the door. I lay there stunned, watching the door, listening to their footsteps trail away. Then I turned to the vent, almost invisible in the darkness. I watched it a long moment. Remembering my old laptop in my sock drawer, I jumped out of bed and avoided the blood and brains on the floor and dug it out. While it powered up, I kept a nervous eye on the vent, hoping I would have time to tell my story, wondering who I will send it to. since I don't have any friends. Even now, as I'm posting this, I'm still watching the vent, waiting for them to return.